Hello children, it's Grandpa Joe again. This video I want to talk about some of my accomplishments. Um, Hard work, I believe in it, and sometimes it pays off. So talk about some of the accomplishments that I had at work. So my first job out of college was working for Electronics Boutique, and they put me in the worst location in the entire Tampa Bay area, which was Eastlake Square Mall. Shortly after I left there, that mall actually shut down, and it became like a business park. So no traffic. You could go on a weekend, walk through the mall and maybe see 10 people. Okay, it was really, really bad. And then, like Friday night and Saturday night, it was full of basically ruffians that would bring in their boom boxes and play loud music and, talk and try to pick each other up, that sort of thing, right? So it was like a spot to meet, to screw around, and so it was rowdy. So customers just left. It was a dangerous part of town at that time. This was the late 80s, so this was when crack was king, and so kind of a rough area. Lots of cars getting stolen. We actually got held up at gunpoint inside the mall. So that's how bad it was. So that being said, we had I guess it's a sort of an accomplishment. We had the regional manager. So this is a person who was over all of the Southeast, and this guy was supposedly like a real hard ass, and he was real judgmental and real particular. Okay. So we were told to watch out, he's going to rip us apart. Well, he ripped all the other stores apart, West Shore and University Square Mall. He destroyed them, told them that they sucked, basically. Well, when he came to our store, he went through the mall and then came back and looked through, was leafing through his little sheet there on sales, and he's like, how is this store even open? How are you pulling these numbers? He said, there's nobody here. Who are you selling to if there's no traffic? How are you making these numbers? You're very close, and sometimes even better than the University Square Mall, which is, the premier mall. And it said, and you're consistently beating the West Shore location. And it's like, how is that possible? I told him that, we have extremely good customer service, and our customers come here specifically for our store. They come in, they buy their video games, and then they leave. They don't shop or stay in the mall. They come and get their games from us, and then they leave. And so he told me and told my district manager that, hey, this store is doing everything it can. I'm amazed that they're getting these kind of numbers. This is, you need to get this guy out of here and put him somewhere else. You should put him in a university location. If he's making these kind of numbers here, there's no telling what he will do at university. So big thumbs up from the regional manager. Was quite an accomplishment. And then I went from there to work for Dixie Foods. That's the hot dog facility, right? Making hot dogs. And as I stated before in another video, they had a situation where they couldn't dump the brine. So they used brine to basically freeze the hot dogs as they come out of the smokehouse. And so basically it was cold, salty water that they would shower down over the hot dogs, and it was so cold that it would freeze them. Well, where that facility was located was in a small town, and they couldn't dump that salt water because the city couldn't process that amount of salt water. And so we had to filter it through a reconditioning process and then reuse it. Well, nowhere in the United States has that's ever been done before. And so it was a process that needed to be reviewed by the USDA, and we had to basically keep a lot of records and generate a lot of reports demonstrating to the USDA that we can successfully filter out the bacteria, remove the bacteria and other contaminants from the brine before and then reuse it. So I was overcharged that. So I took all the, put all the records in the database. I generated all the reports. I also was in charge of the gentleman that ran the reconditioning system and was in charge of the smokehouse people, the people who cleaned the smokehouses and also finished cooking them. So like they ran the smokehouses during production for a couple hours, and then they cleaned the smokehouses. So through my efforts, we were able to get USDA approval for this process. So it's the first time in the United States that a process like this was ever done, and I, successfully was able to get USDA approval for it. So, fairly decent accomplishment, something that's never been done, and was able to get it through. And of course, the management was very happy that we did that. Another little side there with Dixie Foods, they had each facility has a bunch of mechanics to work on machinery and stuff like that, and of course they have to keep a whole bunch of parts available to fix the machines. Well, they had to do an inventory of this every year. Okay, so all the different parts and pieces and everything, they had to do an inventory of it. And they had hired some interns from the local college, and these girls came in and they counted all this stuff up and put it in a computer. Well, unfortunately, the database file got corrupted and they weren't able to retrieve anything. Just as they were getting, they had to turn this stuff in so that they could, use it for tax purposes. And so they came running to me and asked me, because I knew about computers, if there was any way I could fix it. So I took their file and using some different tools that I had, was able to, retrieve their database information and get it back to them. So, a little achievement, but it was certainly important to them. They really needed that information. And then this is a big achievement. They had a problem with sanitation. So they had this guy named Jesse, who was a USDA inspector, and he was super, super picky. And he would keep the plant from starting on time every morning that he inspected. So there was him and another inspector. And the other inspector was pretty lenient. But Jesse was hardcore, okay? So you're not going to get anything past him. And so we had a contract cleaning crew that cleaned the entire facility except for the smokehouses. And like I said, I was in charge of the guys that did the smokehouses. Well, I had a pretty good rapport with Jesse, because he would come and he'd inspect the smokehouses, and sometimes he'd find a little something, but most of the time the smokehouses, pass inspection pretty easily. And so, over and over and over again, they, the contract cleaning crew just couldn't get the job done. And it was probably because they were smoking meth all the time, and they were higher than kites and smoking meth and smoking pot and drinking. So not a whole lot got done. So they decided they were going to fire this contract cleaning crew and hire their own person and hire their own crew. So they hired this guy. He was about 56 or something like that, and with 30 years of experience in the industry. He had all these degrees and all this kind of stuff, right? And he came highly recommended. And this guy is going to fix the sanitation issue here in the facility. Well, they took over the plant in stages, so one section at a time. So they started in the Frankomatic room, which is on the raw side, and then they went to the peel room, and then they went to the finished side, and then they went to the raw side. The raw side they say for last because that's the nastiest place. So anyway, this guy came in, they hired a whole bunch of people, and this guy started to work, but he just could not communicate at all with employees, and they were confused, and he seemed to not know what he was doing. He knew maybe some stuff about chemicals, but he didn't know anything about, a process. He just didn't know how to do the explain to people how to clean. I don't think he knew the right way to do it himself. So this guy, I think it was maybe a couple weeks, they tried this guy out, and it was just a complete nightmare. Okay, they were behind before, but now it was ridiculous. There were days that we didn't even start. So the people who came in to work to make hot dogs ended up having to clean machines and stuff because the cleaning crew didn't get it done, and Jesse wouldn't let them start. So they spent the day cleaning pretty much. And Jesse absolutely couldn't stand this guy. I mean, he was getting on Jesse's last nerve because he would, Jesse would inspect, he would find something, he would tell them, hey, the machine's not clean, you need to clean the machine. And then the guy would whatever Jesse pointed out, he would have somebody wipe away. And then he'd go back down and get Jesse again. So Jesse would come up, inspect, and find something else. It's like, well, there's still, you didn't clean the machine. You have to clean the entire machine, not just what I pointed out. You have to clean the whole thing. If I come back up and find something else again, the machine's not clean. I'm going to keep tagging it up. So that guy would go down there and get Jesse like 6 or 7 times, over and over and over again, trying to get him to come up there and check stuff. And Jesse would always find something. So this guy just didn't know what he was, doing. So eventually, as he moved through the facility, the areas that he left behind, they asked me to watch over, right? So when he left the Frankomatic room, they had me watch the guys in the Frankomatic room. Well, when he left, I would actually teach those guys what it is they needed to do, right, to clean the machines properly, right? Explain how things worked, explain how to inspect the machines, explain how to deal with Jesse when he comes, all that stuff. So the areas that he left behind that they turned over to me to watch, they passed inspection. But everything that he was doing would fail inspection. So as they went around the plant, more and more of the plant they were turning over to me, and those areas were passing. It was just the areas that he was over were failing. So finally they decided, well, let's just give it over to Joe and let him see if he can take this over. So I took over sanitation for the whole plant. I had no assistant because he had me, right? I was his assistant. Well, when they fired him, they didn't hire anybody else. It was just me. But within 2 weeks, I got the facility, trained everybody, and we started up on time for the very first time. That plant had been open for over 2 years and had never started up on time when Jesse inspected. And for the very first time, we started up on time with Jesse inspecting. And we actually, Jesse actually said that we could start skipping inspections, like we flip a coin, and he wouldn't inspect at all that day. Or when he inspected, he would only do certain areas. So they would randomly select an area of the plant to inspect. So instead of inspecting everything, he would inspect just a couple areas. So that saved a huge amount of time on startup. So this was a gigantic accomplishment, because nobody had ever started on time with when Jesse inspected. And now, not only are we starting on time, he's actually skipping inspections and reducing the time that he's taking during his inspection. So that was a gigantic accomplishment there. And so left there and went to Big Lots. And no accomplishments there at Big Lots. They liked working me. They moved me around from store to store. So I worked in, I think, 3 different stores in the short time that I was there. Because I was really good at, putting out stock. Big Lots, at least at that time, they would just ship all kinds of, stuff in these trucks, and you had to individually price them. They had these little bitty stickers that you had to stick on each item. And it took forever. They never had enough staff to do it. So they'd end up with their stock room just getting overrun because the trucks just kept coming. The store manager couldn't say, hey, stop sending me trucks. My stock room is full. They would just keep sending them. And you'd have just the whole stock room just completely filled up with pallets to the point that you couldn't get into anything. The whole thing was just a big mess. And so they would send me into these areas with these big messes to go in and, clean up the stock rooms. So not much of an accomplishment, because they basically overworked me. They accomplished getting their stock rooms, straightened out, but that's it. So not much happened at Big Lots. And then from Big Lots, let's see, hold on a second. I went back to work for Dixie Foods. And that's where I was talking about, they basically were trying to exploit me, trying to use me as a patsy. And so I left there and went to work at Boar's Head. And Boar's Head had quite a few accomplishments there. We put in the first network in a facility. So, we ran our own network wires and put on our own switches and stuff like that. And we just, did a whole lot of work and brought Boar's Head to the point where they could really expand their distribution, like they did with Publix. Okay. Wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for the work that me and the other technicians did. They wouldn't have been able to accomplish that task because there was no automation in the facilities at all when I started. And so all the automation in the facilities now was put in place by myself, Rich Holland, as our leader. So a whole lot of accomplishments there. And then left there, went from Arkansas then to Florida and Sarasota. And there, an accomplishment there was they had no distributor reports. So they had all these different distributors, but they had no sales information. So Boar's Head had no idea what products were selling in which locations. They knew how much product that they sold, but they didn't know, how it was selling, where it was selling, that sort of stuff. They didn't have any information from distributors. So I worked with this other guy named Sean Claiborne, and we created the first sales reports where we basically consolidated all this distributor information. So distributors were sending us sales information in all kinds of formats. Sometimes it would just be like a printed out thing that they would mail. Then they would send stuff in emails. They would send files. And then we had if they were lucky, we had this system that we wanted to, the distributors to use. If they use that system, then we can pull information from that. But it was really, really difficult to basically take this information from all these different formats and consolidate it into one report. And so, that was one of the things that I accomplished there. Then, of course, I got fired from Boar's Head, basically because they were putting in this new system that I told them stunk, that they was going to fail, that they were going to spend millions of dollars and wasn't going to go anywhere. They were going to get screwed. Well, they let me go, and turns out that I was right. A few years later, about 5 years later, they decided the system that they purchased wasn't going to work. They never got, it to work properly in any of the facilities, and so they had to, buy something else and put that in place. So my cousin John was still working at Boar's Head, and he basically said in the meeting that, they were in the meeting, they were talking about how the system that they had wasn't going to work. It's never going to work. We can't upgrade it. And everything that the guy said bad about the application, John was there saying, yeah, that's what Joe said. That's what Joe said. And they're like, who's this Joe guy you keep talking about? And he said, before we put this system in place, Joe Terhune told them that this wasn't going to work, that they weren't going to, if they bought this system, that they were never going to have a full implementation. They would have a partial implementation at best, that it was never going to do what they wanted to do. They were never going to get the reports out of it that they wanted, and they wouldn't be able to upgrade it. And it's like, here we are. We spent millions and millions of dollars, even more money than he said we would spend. He thought we would spend around $6 million. Turns out we spent close to 10. And none of this works. And here we are, moving to a system which is the one that he recommended all those years ago. So if they would have listened to him, they wouldn't have wasted this money, and we'd already be ahead of the game. So not real an accomplishment, more like retribution, I guess. So anyway, so Boar's Head. Then I went to Aaron Sales and Lease, which was was terrible. Hated that job. Sucked. I completely failed at that. No accomplishments there. The exact opposite. But then I moved to the clerk's office. And in the early 2000s, the Supreme Court put out a moratorium on court records online. So there was an epidemic of identity theft, and data miners were basically taking court documents and official records documents and looking for account numbers, birthdays, social security numbers, personal information, and then stealing people's identity using court documents and using official records. So the Supreme Court basically said no clerk is going to be able to have their records online anymore. Well, that was a problem because that was how attorneys and people got those documents. Now, if they can't get them online, that means they have to come to the courthouse and get the documents there. So basically, that means you would have to hire a whole bunch of extra staff. Now, the clerk's office is going to be overrun with people coming in trying to make copies and stuff. They're going to have to buy additional equipment. They're going to have additional people hired to handle, all this printing that they're going to have to do, because now that's the only way you can get the documents to people is by printing them out at the clerk's office and handing it to them, right? So this is not good. So the clerk that I worked for went to the Supreme Court and asked them if he could do a pilot program in which he would demonstrate to them that they could securely provide those records. So basically, we're going to redact all the personal information from the records and then put them online in a very secure way so that only the people that had the rights to access this information could. So you'd log in and you could only see the records that you were allowed to see. That was the plan. So they already had a system, right, a website, and the clerk thought that that was good enough. What they had was good enough. And but I told my boss, I said, listen, this thing that they have is a piece of crap. It's not secure at all. It's the worst. And if they take this to Supreme Court, they'll be laughed out of there. If they have anybody who knows anything at all about IT, they will laugh the clerk out of that, meeting. And, the moratorium will stay in place. So I'm going to redo this thing the right way so that, this whole thing will be successful. And so I went to work. Now, there was the court counsel, which is the lawyer for the clerk. He was completely against what I was doing because he thought the system they had was good enough. I've used this for 6 years and I know that it works. We don't want to change anything, take the risk of it not working, and embarrassing the clerk. I said, no, what you're doing is going to embarrass the clerk. I'm trying to avoid embarrassing the clerk. You don't understand how technology works. You're a lawyer, okay? You don't know what you're talking about. I'm telling you, this is all messed up. It's not secure at all. And anybody who knows about IT will have access to whatever records they want. This is bad. I need to fix it. And so he was completely against it. And I mean, it was almost come to blows over this. He would get so upset and angry that he didn't want to change. He didn't want to use the system that I was building. He wanted to keep the system they had, right? And it was pretty much, my boss, he didn't care. He was going to do whatever they wanted to do. So, it came to the point where it's like, well, they're going to use the new system and that's what they're going to use to show the Supreme Court and all that. And I'm like, okay, fine. But, I want it known that I had nothing to do with this, that I said that this system was crappy, so that when they get laughed out of there, they're not going to come back and blame me and say it was, oh, well, the site was bad and that's Joe's fault, right? So anyway, one day the clerk came over, and we just happened to be over there in the IT offices, and he walked by my office and stepped in. He said, "Hey, Joe, listen, they're telling me that you're saying that the site we're using for court records is no good." He's like, "Well, I use it and says I think it's a good system. Why are you saying that it's no good?" And well, let me show you, Mr. Shore. If you give me 5 minutes, I can demonstrate why. And so, using this, the current site, I showed him how easy it was to access restricted records without even logging in. Okay, without even logging in, I could go and get, like sexual battery cases, or I can get juvenile records without even logging in. And I told him, I said, this is how data mining will access our data, and it will get all this. I'm sure it already has. But if we want to stop this, you're going to have to use the system that I created. And so he's like, oh, crap, I didn't realize that. Yeah, we need to change that. And so I won, and we took that system to the state. First of all, we had somebody review it. So they hired this IT professional to come in and review the security on everything, the security specialist. And he's like, yeah, this looks good. This is all good. The website security is top notch. And the way you got this set up, that's going to work. And so they finally took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court mandated that if any of the clerks wanted to put their records online, they had to use the system that I created. So, and at that point, the Supreme Court lifted the moratorium, but only if they used the process and adhered to the guidelines that I had designed. So, pretty big accomplishment. And that allowed court records back online for the whole state of Florida. So that was a pretty big deal. The next thing was working for the 12th Judicial Circuit. I created an e-warrant system. All right, so there was no electronics warrant system in the state of Florida. And I don't know about the rest of the country, but nobody else knew of an electronics warrant. So this was like the first time that anybody had attempted to do this. So they asked me, they gave me the concept, and I built them an e-warrant system which allowed the judge to view the warrant in a browser and to draw on it, to sign it, to add text to it, and then save it, and that would get sent back to the law enforcement agent. So basically, with this system, a law enforcement officer can request a warrant from their car. The judge can sign it and notify the sheriff back, or the law enforcement back, that it's been signed. And so the whole process could take less than 3 minutes. Submit the warrant, the judge looks it over and signs it, and the law enforcement agent has it back in their hands, signed and ready to serve in a matter of minutes. So that was a huge accomplishment. It was the first that was ever done in the state of Florida. And, many other circuits are using the software that I developed. And those that didn't use it, took my code and built their own. So the ones that have electronic warrants are using my system, basically. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. And then another accomplishment, I actually, when I was working for the clerk wanted the ability to electronically file. So attorneys, when they were to file a motion or something like that on a case, they wanted to be able to file electronically. So you'd go to a website, you would, upload your document, and then that would get sent to the clerk. And then the clerk could then, based on the case number, it would automatically get assigned to that particular case. Or it would go into a queue where someone at the clerk's office could assign it to the proper case. So I worked with a contractor that they hired, and he and I together built this electronic filing system for the clerk of the Manatee County Clerk of Circuit Court. Well, the state agency that manages that kind of stuff, they heard about what we were doing, and they actually asked if they could use our code and build a portal for the entire state, so that way everybody, you could file, anyone in a state could file, and it would get those documents would get sent to the clerk in whatever way that's available to the particular clerk. So another huge accomplishment. We basically built the first concept of e-filing, and then they used that to build what is now called the e-portal, which is used by all, the entire state. So all circuits and all attorneys that are in Florida use that to file documents. So pretty big accomplishment. And I think that about does it for now. But that's, just some of the things that I've done over my career, and had a pretty big effect working for the clerk's office on, the state courts. So, hard work, it pays off. I got a few little accolades and stuff like that, but no money. That's the downside of those accomplishments. They don't pay very well. You get an award and everybody, yay, Joe. But the pay increases don't come with those. But I have been taken pretty good care of over the years, working for the clerk and working for the 12th Judicial Circuit. So I'm really happy with the career I've had, and hopefully in your career you can, make have some big achievements and do some stuff that's going to, be noticed by, be useful to a lot of other people. Well, let me quit bragging about myself. That's that's something else you need to know about Pat Ball. Every now and then he brags on himself.